doing the perp walk.
What do you think?
If y'all are ready, I think we're ready.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I guess we're ready to begin. It's 7:05. If anybody has any objections, we can wait a little longer. And 53, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 7:05. So we're officially clear to begin then. If we could each introduce ourselves, your name and your relation to the university. I'll begin. I'm Josh McKenna. I'll be the moderator. I'm a student worker with the battalion and a freshman here on campus.
Hi, I'm Victor Wilson. I'm a professor and department head of educational psychology. This is my 32nd year here, and I teach classes in statistical modeling for graduates, and have taught child and adolescent development classes for undergraduates.
My name is Robert Chimino. I am a senior-ish computer science major. I'm a director of an organization on campus called One Aggie Land, which is essentially a collaboration of social justice groups, and the chair of the Aggie Green Fund.
My name is Scott Lewis. I am the Texas Legislative Director for Students for Concealed Carry on Campus. I am based out of Austin. Please don't hate me. And I've been with the organization for 4 years now.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Now, at this time, everybody can take their chance to silence your cell phones so we can avoid any embarrassing, awkward interruptions. Likewise, y'all as well, if you would like to check that. And as everybody's checking their cell phones, predetermined rules, as we discussed, it's going to be an informal debate. No formal structure aside from the fact that it will be a statement and then rebuttal and consistently bouncing back and forth. And I believe we decided that we were going to go with 7-minute bouts with a 5-minute warning, just to make sure that you are aware and you're able to close up your remarks. We also discussed that the pro-change side would present first in order to allow us a view into what the topic is. And with that, I guess we will begin. And let's hear from the pro.
Okay. Well, as most of you probably know, the state of Texas has allowed licensed concealed carry since 1996. If you are 21 years of age and meet a certain set of guidelines and restrictions and undergo training, testing, and expanded background checks, you can obtain a license to carry a concealed handgun in public. Our contention is that college campuses should not be off limits to licensed concealed carry. When the law was first passed in 1995, concealed carry was still considered relatively new. It was considered somewhat unproven. Believe it or not, though Texas has a reputation as kind of a rootin' tootin' gun-totin' society, it was actually illegal to carry a handgun in Texas from the period of Reconstruction following the Civil War until licensed concealed carry was passed and enacted in January 1st, 1996. So when it first passed, they were concerned that this was going to lead to blood in the streets. There was a lot of people saying, oh, how's that? No problem. There were a lot of people who thought that it was going to lead to blood in the streets. It had just been passed 8 years before in Florida. Florida kind of set the standard for licensed concealed carry in the U.S., and even though there hadn't been any problems so far in Florida, people were still somewhat concerned. So they created a long list of places where concealed carry wasn't allowed. The idea being that if this does go wrong, we don't want it going wrong in churches and hospitals and governmental meetings and amusement parks and college campuses. Now, over the years, we've whittled down that list of places where it's not allowed, as we've seen that it's not causing problems in the places where it is allowed. In 1999, there was a mass shooting in a church in Fort Worth. People immediately started asking, why weren't these people allowed the means to defend themselves? Gunman walked in, shot and killed 7 people before his gun jammed and somebody was able to tackle him. So they rewrote the law. They took churches off the list of places where concealed carry is statutorily prohibited. They removed hospitals. They removed amusement parks. They removed governmental meetings. And over time, there have been various changes to the law as we've seen how it's worked out. Now, in the state of Texas, currently 1 person out of every 55 is licensed to carry a concealed handgun. And yet you are 20 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to be murdered or negligently killed by a concealed handgun license holder. When you sit down in a packed 330-seat movie theater, statistically speaking, there are 6 concealed handgun license holders in that theater with you. And yet I bet you're not afraid to watch a movie. I bet you are not deterred from enjoying or taking part in the movie or from going to a mall or something like that. There are currently 71 college campuses outside of Texas that allow licensed concealed carry on campus. About half of those have allowed it for an average of over 5.5 years. They have yet to see a single resulting incident of gun violence, including threats and suicides. They have not seen a single resulting gun accident. They have not seen a single resulting gun theft. Every peer-reviewed study on licensed concealed carry has concluded that licensed concealed carry cannot be shown to lead to an increase in either violent crime or gun deaths. Quite simply speaking, it's not causing problems throughout the rest of Texas. It's not causing problems on the college campuses where it's allowed outside of Texas. There's no reason to assume it's going to cause problems on Texas college campuses. Our question is, if it's not going to cause problems, then why deny individuals the means to protect themselves? What are we accomplishing? And it is the contention of Students for Concealed Carry on Campus that these state laws and school policies accomplish nothing more than stacking the odds in favor of any lunatic or criminal willing to disregard state law and school policy. Thank you.
All righty. And now from the dissent.
I think I guess the way I'll sort of originally start the debate off is in 2008, the decision DC versus Heller that essentially changed the law from the ability for militias to carry weapons and separated it, saying individuals were allowed to carry weapons unconnected with a militia. Also stated within that decision did not necessarily repeal any sort of long-standing prohibitions on restrictions to carry weapons in hospitals, federal buildings, again, like he said, as well as college campuses. So the right to carry handguns was not determined at the federal level to go onto college campuses, and as well at the state level, even in the state of Texas, which actually has a little bit more restrictive laws in terms of getting a concealed carry license than a lot of other states. A lot of states have just sort of a right to carry. If you're over the age of 21, you can bring a gun. You can carry a weapon. In Texas, it's a little bit more difficult, but even in our state, the judicial system has not allowed the right for individuals to carry weapons onto campus, leaving that up to the individuals' colleges. To me, meaning that they weren't willing to say that it was a general individual right in the United States. It was determined based on the actual legislation of the colleges. I think another sort of I guess a sort of vernacular that comes around, call it the bringing guns on the campus, is while it may not escalate, I don't think it encourages safety in any way.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
Try it now.
How's that? There we go.
Sorry about that.
And looking through the evidence, I think he is correct in that there's no evidence that says that it necessarily increases violence in any sort of incidents when there are weapons around. But in terms of college campuses, the information isn't necessarily statistically significant in that there are only 71 college campuses in one state that mandates it and a few states that allow you to sort of decide to have it. In terms of safety, I think that's a really important thing on campus. There's a lot of ways to address safety. For the top 100 safest schools on campus, only one college is within the two states that allow colleges to carry weapons. That's University of Colorado. But they only have very recently allowed the individuals to carry weapons on the campus. So in that sense, when addressing safety on campus, you would think you want to model yourselves off of those campuses who have had a long time successful rate of safety. Also in that sense, just as an example of violent crime, of course, there's lots of different types of violent crime, but murder rate in the United States is about 5.5 per 100,000 at the college age. Between about 18 to 29, the murder rate is about 10.1 per 100,000. And in also, of course, the college range, on college campuses, the murder rate is about 1.6 per 100,000. College campuses are about 8 times safer than the general public in terms of murder. And in terms of other types of violent crimes, I don't think there's need necessarily to go through all those individual statistics. But I don't think that bringing weapons onto campus or allowing weapons to be brought onto campus will encourage safety in any way, as much as add a sort of extra mix to that equation that we aren't necessarily very familiar with. And in terms of my own opinion, while I am personally against the bringing concealed weapons onto campus, I think if we all want to do it, it doesn't seem entirely unreasonable, but we have to be very prepared for what that means. That means there will be access to weapons in residence halls. That means that you get picked to live in your residence hall, you may be living with someone who has a gun in their closet, and you may not be comfortable with that. You're going to be in classrooms. You're going to be in kind of high tense situations with a lot of young people who, it's just kind of it's a sensitive situation that I don't think there's a lot of empirical evidence to say how it's affected by concealed carry, but we have to understand sort of those measures. And a lot of times these things like Virginia Tech or these other really awful shootings, that occur on college campuses are referenced as reasons for why we should carry weapons. But in the sake of being able to down an assailant, I think Virginia Tech is a great example. The first 2 shootings were in one place, and 2 hours later, the 30 other people who were killed were in a separate location. And the Code Maroon is a great way to prevent that kind of thing. 30 people's lives could have been saved had Virginia Tech had some kind of system like that. So basically meaning that if you want to save the lives of an additional 30 people, bringing more guns onto campus, while that has not been proved to save lives, things like Code Maroon have been proven to save lives. As well, the survivors of Virginia Tech are actually ones who have started these sorts of organizations to prevent students from bringing concealed weapons onto campus. The Students for a Guns-Free Campus was started by Colin Goddard, who was shot 4 times in the incident that happened 2 hours later, shot 4 times and survived from Virginia Tech, and he helped to establish that organization, and he thought it was outrageous that after the Virginia Tech shootings, the response was that people wanted to have more guns on campus as opposed to find the ways to eliminate the sort of like safety risks by not being able to correspond with each other. And I think that that's sort of a very significant sort of thing. And also, in terms of being able to respond to something like that, and the concealed carry tests and the concealed carry classes, you're not told to address an assailant or and address someone shooting. You're told to go away. Even the Secret Service, when Ronald Reagan was shot, they all have guns. They didn't shoot the guy, they tackled him. And these are professionals who are specifically designed to protect him at a very close range from a shooter, and they didn't use their handguns and that kind of thing. So in terms of safety, even military personnel, like people who are designed to protect, will use handguns at the very last moment. So I don't think that that's really relevant in terms of preventing shootings.
Okay. And now I believe it's time for the pros.
Was that
rebuttal.
A couple of points here. You mentioned the Second Amendment. What we're making is not a Second Amendment argument. My appointment to the Supreme Court is still pending, so I'm not going to comment on that. What we're making is a pragmatic argument based on the facts at hand. And we believe that the facts at hand suggest that it should not be prohibited, that there is no justification for prohibiting it. My opponent talked a lot about, will this make campuses safer? What we're not proposing something that's aimed at lowering the crime rates on college campuses. What we're proposing is something that will allow individuals the means to protect themselves. We can't guarantee that this will make campuses statistically safer. We can guarantee it won't make them less safe, and it will allow individuals some recourse other than hiding under their desk, waiting and hoping not to die if they're faced with a gunman, walking down the aisle shooting people in the head at point-blank range. He talked about the crime rate on college campuses. He pointed out that college campuses are statistically very safe. He's right. For instance, the University of Texas, the crime rate at the University of Texas is roughly equivalent to the crime rate in some of the nicer neighborhoods in Austin. And yet we don't tell people in those neighborhoods they aren't allowed the means to protect themselves. The reason being that we realize that those neighborhoods, just like college campuses, though statistically safe, do play host to every type of violent crime found in the rest of society. And if you say that because this place is very safe, you shouldn't be allowed to have a gun there, then what you're saying essentially is that we should only be able to carry guns in those places where danger is or violence is either likely or imminent. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't go places where danger is likely or imminent. I want to be able to carry a gun so that I'm able to protect myself if danger finds me someplace where I wasn't expecting it, like at the grocery store, the shopping mall, or in my Russian class at 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. He talked about Code Maroon. He said there's a lot of other options that can save lives, and I 100% agree with that. But the thing is, Code Maroon and all those other options are not incompatible with licensed concealed carry. You can have preparedness measures and preventive measures that go hand in hand. A Code Maroon is great unless the gunman's coming down your aisle and you're going to be the next victim, and then it's not doing you a lot of good. Residence halls. First of all, I think it's worth noting that very few individuals over the age of 21 live on campus. There are some, but statistically the vast majority of them live off campus. As far as we did a comparison at the University of Texas, largest college campus in the U.S., in the state, 4th largest in the U.S. They've got over 50,000 students. When you compare their on-campus housing statistics to the Texas Department of Public Safety licensing statistics, you're looking at somewhere between 10 and 20 concealed handgun license holders living on campus, probably closer to 10 than 20. What that means is that you're basically saying we need a campus-wide ban on concealed carry because we can't figure out how to secure the firearms belonging to these 10 to 20 individuals. In Utah, they've got a great system. You can say on your application for a residence hall, I don't want to live in a residence hall. or in a room with somebody who's carrying a gun, and then they match up those people who've said, I don't want to live with someone who's got a gun. The bills that are currently before the Texas legislature, they will allow universities to regulate the storage of firearms in dorms, and it gives them, the way it's written, it gives them a lot of leeway in how they do that. I don't know how Texas A&M would choose to do that, but that is an option they have. Their hands are not completely tied in that sense. You know, he mentioned Colin Goddard. Colin's a good guy. When the shooting happened, Colin took out his cell phone, called 911, told the operator there's a gunman in the building, there's a shooting happening. Then he told the operator the shooter's in our classroom, and then he got shot. He had time to take out his cell phone, call 911, and talk to the operator. He would have had time to draw a weapon, take aim, and fire. Colin had time to respond, but he responded with the tool he had at hand, which was a cell phone. When Colin got shot, he dropped his phone, and a girl beside him picked it up. She was then on the phone for 5 minutes with a 911 operator before she was shot. Fortunately, she too survived, but their professor and 10 of their classmates lost their lives that day. Now, I'm not saying that concealed carry would have prevented the Virginia Tech massacre. There's no way of knowing. There's way too many variables to make that type of determination. What I do know is it would have changed the odds. It could have potentially given someone some recourse other than hiding under his or her desk, hoping that maybe the gunman walks into another classroom or chooses a different victim. Finally, he mentioned Ronald Reagan. All I'm going to say is there's a difference between a targeted assassination and a random act of violence or a school shooting or something like that. An assassination, that becomes a quick draw scenario. This guy's already got his gun out. How quick can you get yours out? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a scenario where you have little recourse but to defend yourself. And again, in Virginia Tech, this was a 10 to 12-minute massacre. Now, is this just about the Virginia Techs or the rare school shooting? No. Like I said, every type of violent crime that occurs in the rest of society occurs on college campuses. So if we're telling people you have the right to protect yourself in the rest of society, why are we telling them they don't have the right or the means to protect yourself on college campuses? Why am I allowed the means to defend myself when studying late at the city library but not at the campus library? Why am I allowed the means to defend myself when walking back to my car after a pre-dawn workout at a local health club, but not when walking back to my car after a pre-dawn workout at the student rec center? What are we? Why am I allowed the means to defend myself in a church on Sunday, but not in a college classroom on Monday? Where is the distinction here? Why are we saying it's okay in place A, but not in place B? Last time I checked, college campuses are an open environment. Somebody can walk into a college classroom carrying a backpack full of guns just as easily as carrying a backpack full of books. So what are we really trying to accomplish by saying, no, the rules say you can't do that? We've essentially established an honor system-based policy here, which is clearly ineffective.
Okay, and with that, is there a rebuttal from the dissent?
Well, it's not so much a rebuttal as a discussion, I would hope. I have to start this by saying I'm a proud graduate of the University of Colorado, which also sold and sells beer. So think about this. Not only we have guns, but we have beer on campus. What a wonderful place. I love it. If you read my battalion article, you already know mostly what I'm going to say about this. I'm coming at this from this perspective as a psychologist and also as someone who was in charge of a lot of young men who had a lot of guns. And so I do have some experience from a couple different perspectives. I do want to start, however, by saying that students are not the only ones with a perspective on this campus. And I was a little bit miffed to see all of the emphasis on students saying what they wanted. But there are also 2,000 faculty or 2,500 faculty and almost 8,000 staff on campus. And we have had, not only have we had any hearing from them, we've had no discussion from them about their feelings on it. I cannot say I have any survey evidence, but my prediction would be the faculty would overwhelmingly say no. We really don't want a bunch of young men and women running around with guns in our classroom. But that begs the argument that Mr. Lewis has made. Let me move on to a couple things. My preference is not to have any concealed carry on campus by anybody. But if I had to permit it, I would like to have it in the following conditions. Police trainees, people who have had systematic training in the use of weapons and for specific kinds of situations, military, both active, completed, honorably discharged, retired. I think those people also have had the kind of training that makes a difference in this. I think the core seniors, probably those particularly who perhaps have gone, had their basic and so forth, are going to have the same kind of skills and training that I think will be effective in these extremely rare situations. And finally, the one that I'm sure will insult most people here, which is that it shouldn't be permitted for anybody under age 25. And my rationale for that is coming out of my knowledge and understanding of child and adolescent development is that until about that age, on average, now of course all of you have clearly exceeded this limit, but for most people, the prefrontal lobes, which are the primary mechanisms for judgment, self-control, executive decision-making, do not fully functionally complete their development until the mid-20s. And as my battalion little article noted, I would simply do this by your having to show your insurance rate, and it would solve most of the kinds of problems that I think that we might have. The concern I have is that I think there's an over-concern about protecting yourself from events that are so rare as to practically be undiscernible. I simply don't see the level of violence warranting this level of response. In addition to that, I'm very much concerned about unintended consequences. I do think we do not have an adequate track record on this. I'm willing to be convinced either way if we have that, but quite basically, a college campus is not like a church, is not like the grocery store, and is not like the rest of the places that you're at because it concentrates young people, and the concentration of young people and lots of weapons is a bad mix. And I think there's much greater potential when you put that many folks together with potentially that many guns. Now, it may be, given that it's 21, that risk goes down greatly, and that certainly is another factor to be considered. How much actual carry is going to take place? It'd be nice to know what the real carry rate is, and quite frankly, that may not be as much of an issue as I'm suggesting it is. But it is a concern from a psychological and social perspective that is not equivalent to these research studies that have been done in other settings. The last point, how am I doing?
You're doing well.
Okay.
You have about a minute.
The last point that a couple of points I'd like to make. One is cost efficiency. I suspect we could probably do this more cost efficiently by, in fact, installing SWAT team members judiciously around campus than the cost of the carry conceal is going to be for that. And in fact, we would have trained people in those areas. Last point I make is I guarantee you I'm not going to sit under a desk if I hear shots coming down. I have been trained. I have been in combat. I'm going to find myself weapons and mechanisms, and I'm going after it. I'm not going to wait for it. And I think part of what we saw was this, making my point, is this lack of training that people had that didn't really know what to do or how to try to get at it, which is why I suggested those exemptions might be useful in this situation.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we've been speaking now for just under 25 minutes, and I was curious if either of you would like to open for specific topics within the area, or do we want to continue our
I wanted to
volleys?
respond to a few of the points he made, if that's okay.
Then we'll continue our volleys, and we'll try again later.
Okay. Just going to go down the list kind of in order here. He mentioned University of Colorado sells beer on campus. We sell beer a lot of places throughout society. That doesn't mean that it's okay to drink it and carry under the law. As for carrying in bars and places like that where the point of being there is to drink, that would still be prohibited. State of Texas still prohibits carrying a gun in a bar. If the bar is on campus, that's not going to change. Now, some of our opponents have tried to make the point that if we lift the restrictions on campus, then suddenly that's going to change the rules at bars and elementary schools and all these other places that might be located on a college campus. That's simply not the facts. The analogy I use, you may find it a tad off color, but in 2003, the U.S. Supreme Court lifted Texas's sodomy laws. It said that the state could not prohibit sodomy. Now, does that mean that sodomy is now legal in public parks and on church pews and in bus stops and places like that? No, there are still restrictions on it. The same thing goes with concealed carry. If we lift the statutory ban on concealed carry on college campuses, that's not going to change a statutory ban on concealed carry at bars and elementary schools and any place else that might be located on a college campus. The professor said that he thinks, faculty might not be in favor of this. I've heard from a number of people, how would a professor feel if he had to issue bad grades to students who might be carrying guns? He already might be issuing bad grades to students who might be carrying guns. Why is the professor more concerned about issuing bad grades to the trained, licensed, carefully screened adults who are seeking the right to carry on campus legally than to the untrained, unlicensed, unscreened lunatics and criminals who may already be carrying on campus illegally? Because if you're really worried about somebody shooting you over a bad grade, you better be worried about if they're carrying a gun now. And if I were a professor, I'd appreciate being allowed the means to protect myself from that type of student. He mentioned that maybe he would be okay with allowing military, veterans, members of the Corps, et cetera, to carry concealed handguns on campus. Problem is, this misses the point of licensed concealed carry. The point is not to create some sort of de facto amateur security force. The point is to allow individuals the means to protect themselves. What we're talking about is not campus security, it's personal security. These are people who are allowed this means pretty much everywhere else in the state of Texas, yet they're denied it on these college campuses, which are large open environments often the size of small cities. A lot of people say, well, but the police, they go through weeks and weeks of training, and a concealed handgun license holder, they only go through, 1 day of training. That's not, well, first of all, police don't go through weeks of training to learn to carry concealed handguns for personal protection. They go through weeks of training to learn to be police officers. I have no need of the knowledge of how to drive a police car or operate a police radio. I'm never going to kick down a door or raid a meth lab. I'm never going to have to apply handcuffs. That's not knowledge I need. All I need to know is how to use a concealed handgun at relatively close range to protect myself or a loved one. And that is the type of thing you do not need extensive tactical training for. If you take if you go to any law enforcement academy, they typically teach you that even most law enforcement shootings happen at very close range. Personal protection shootings happen at even closer range than that. So you don't need dead-eye accuracy or lightning-fast reflexes. The test you pass to obtain your concealed handgun license is considered adequate by the state of Texas to certify law enforcement, with one exception. The one exception being that law enforcement must also complete a timed reload. It's assumed that because you're going to be in a self-defense shooting, you're probably not going to have to reload and take on another set of bad guys, so that's not part of the CHL test. But other than that, it is actually considered adequate to certify law enforcement in this state. Now, the professor talked a lot about young people, maturity levels, things like that. In this debate, we constantly have to point out that this is not a debate about keeping guns out of the hands of college students. This is not going to change who can buy a gun. It's not going to change who can obtain a concealed handgun license. All it's going to allow is the same trained, licensed adults who are carrying pretty much everywhere else to do so on campus. Basically, the same people who aren't getting drunk or distraught and shooting you at McDonald's aren't going to get drunk or distraught and shoot you in the classroom. I obviously do not have a degree in psychology, much less a doctorate in psychology, so I cannot speak quite as much to the prefrontal lobe theories. I will say this, that as I understand it, the majority of prefrontal cortex or frontal lobe development has been completed by your early 20s. That basically what's going on for the next 4 or 5 years is basically the finishing touches. A couple of quotes I found here, and yeah, it was just a Google search. I can't claim any type of extensive research on this, but Dr. J.N. Guide, G-I-E-E-D, who did many of these studies doing brain imaging on adolescents, determining at what point their brains were fully developed, he said, late maturation of the prefrontal cortex, which is essential in judgment, decision-making, and impulse control, has prominently entered discourse affecting the social, legislative, judicial, parenting, and educational realms. Despite the temptation to trade the complexity and ambiguity of human behavior for the clarity and aesthetic beauty of colorful brain images, we must be careful not to overinterpret the neuroimaging findings as they relate to public policy. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that even the people who are doing these studies are saying it's far too soon to start making public policy off of these. As far as insurance rates, those insurance rates are not based on what age your prefrontal cortex develops. They're based on accident rates. People over the age of 25 tend to get in accidents at a much lower rate than people under the age of 25. I think a large part of that can be attributed to the fact that they have a lot more driving experience than people under the age of 25. And as far as cost, I don't know what they assume that the continued cost of allowing concealed carry on campus is going to be. I don't know that any of the 71 campuses that currently allow it have undergone any massive, unfunded mandates, so to speak. As far as the rate of concealed carry among persons of typical college age, which I'm meaning people under the age of 25, is typically about 1/3 of 1%. So you're talking about one person out of every 300 on a college campus. And I will close with that.
Sounds good. Do we have any comments?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. First, I'd like to commend Mr. Lewis on his unbelievable preparedness. I think his 4 years with the Students for Concealed Carry is really impressive. My experience so far with the concealed carry issue is about 7 days or 6 days. If you all read my article in the battalion, that's pretty much the day that I decided to write that article. A friend of mine is actually in the audience, and he may have seen me and a little bit upset and wanted to write this article, understanding that the argument for concealed carry has been very organized, and to their credit, I think it's a very good thing that they're very organized and able to articulate in a really good way, and I'm really impressed with that. I think there are a lot of really interesting arguments about the semantics about whether or not protecting for yourself, and I think the weird semantically is that if bringing guns on campus isn't about safety, why is it that it's about protecting yourself? I think that is about safety, and I think that was a weird way to sort of change the argument away from safety, but I think it absolutely is, and considering it is a truly safe place and a unique environment, I do still think that's significant. I think another thing to address is that I don't think that the way that the United States should progress is in the direction of bringing more weapons. I think having more opportunities for us to carry more weapons will increase the sale of weapons. It will increase the opportunity for people to sort of understand weapons. And I think it's actually a bad thing in the same way that the United States is sort of in the forefront for not implementing torture. I think it's a really important thing that we should probably try to be on the forefront for issues like this. I think we have an opportunity to really set an example for people all around the country and people all around the world, really, saying that not only do we is our campus safe, but we're willing to keep it safe without having to bring volatile handguns onto campus. And I think that's, and I obviously can't bring up a lot of statistics and things. I've done a little bit of my research, but I think that's a really important point. And that college campuses a lot of times are able to sort of push the envelope in terms of the moral standards of the United States and places around the world, and they've done a lot in terms of like civil rights acts and these types of things they've been able to enact. I think that we have a really good opportunity here, especially considering the legislation coming up in the state of Texas. I think also that there is a piece of legislation coming up in Lubbock mentioning that they may want to lower the concealed handgun age to 18. Now, I'm not saying it has traction, but if laws like that are also being implemented, that means that these concealed carry rates are going to be way more inflated than what we're saying. Now, of course, that isn't actually happening. But the fact that the bill is introduced and that the people who are proponents of guns want to lower this age, that is more, I think, the direction we're going, and I think that the direction we need to go is the exact opposite. And allowing for guns to come on campus is moving towards the direction of having young people carry guns or having irresponsible people carry guns, or the fact that, I forget exactly the term, and I think you may actually know this if you can help me with this, but essentially you can take the test in Virginia and carry weapons. Reciprocity. And I'm sure he knows more about the legal sort of standards of this, but essentially meaning that there are other states that we sort of collaborate with in terms of the legal statutes. And I think that we need to close those barriers. I think we need to close these sorts of windows to make sure that if we're going to carry guns, then it needs to be in a safe, structured manner that doesn't allow for holes like reciprocity or holes like lowering the age to 18. And we need to set the standard for the United States and the rest of the world as Texas A&M Aggies who take care of each other, we have this Aggie family, this Aggie network, and the sense of camaraderie on campus. I think that we have the ability to work together for safety beyond bringing volatile handguns.
Make a comment?
Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks. Just a point about the training. I don't see any evidence that concealed carry training has anything to do with what I was talking about. The issue of training is that when you go through systematic training, the intent of it is that you begin to understand how to respond to extreme situations. These are very commonly done in these various situations. I'm more worried about getting shot by somebody pulling out their weapon and start banging away, who has never had any of that kind of experience than I am with somebody who's been through the kind of military and police training that people have, which is why I suggested that piece. Last note on the frontal lobes. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. The MRI stuff is only the latest and it merely supplements what has been going on in research for 3 or 4 decades on this. I've participated in some of that in children's development of their intellectual functioning. And the insurance companies, in fact, did get it right. And he actually made my point. There's a whole reason why the insurance rate drops at 25 and why the accidents go down and all, and it has much more to do with judgment and reflection and clear evaluation by that point. And beyond that, I'm enjoying the discussion, and I hope maybe we can open these things up.
Okay. Did we want to continue with comments, or do we want to...
Could I just respond to actually just a couple of things he said?
Just a couple of points?
Yeah, and then we
Okay.
can move on.
Sounds good.
First thing is he said, he thinks that we should be moving in the other direction. We should be, our laws should be evolving. I actually think our laws are evolving. If you look for years at what gun control advocates wanted, they wanted gun owners to have to go through mandatory training. They wanted them to have to go through testing. They wanted them to have to go through expanded background checks. They wanted them to have to get licenses. What have gun rights advocates wanted for decades? They've wanted to be able to have their guns on them for personal protection. So we've essentially created a compromise where if you go through the training, the testing, the background checks, you can have your gun on you for personal protection. I think that's progressive. I don't think that progressive necessarily means we're moving away from guns or we're moving toward guns. It means we're working out a compromise that basically works for everybody. The other thing is, the legislation he was talking about in Lubbock. It's not actually legislation; it's a lawsuit. There's a young man. He's 18 or 19 years old now. He's suing the state of Texas for not issuing him a concealed handgun license. He's saying that under the Second Amendment, he should be allowed to get a concealed handgun license. The Supreme Court has not indicated in any way, I think, that they're going to extend the Heller-McDonald decision to include the right to carry, particularly to include the right to carry for individuals under the age of 21. I don't see this court case going anywhere. I'm not, again, my nomination's still pending, so I don't know for sure. But I don't think this is something you need to worry about. If it does happen, it's going to happen years from now. We may even have a different Supreme Court by the time it happens. As for the reciprocity argument, what he's referring to is that there are agreements with other states so that if they honor our concealed handgun licenses, we'll honor their concealed handgun licenses. And by and large, that's a good thing. The problem is that the law in Texas currently does not prohibit a Texan from getting an out-of-state license, so there's a loophole where you can essentially, if you're a Texan, you can go get your license in a state that has less stringent requirements. The way we're addressing this is the bills that are being proposed right now only allow Texas licenses. They basically say that if you want to carry on a college campus, you have to have a Texas license. We recognize that that's an issue as far as fixing the problem throughout the rest of the state. There are other legislators who address that type of issue who are working on addressing that issue throughout the rest of the state, but as far as just specifically to college campuses, it's being addressed, and it's addressed in these bills, and it's not something you're going to have to worry about on the A&M campus or any other college campus. And I don't know if you want to follow up to that or if you want to have questions.
Okay. In that case, would anybody in the audience like to ask any questions? We have a microphone up here. If you would like to, please come on down to the front here and state your name, your relation to the college or to the university, and also go ahead and fill out your question, please.
I think maybe if y'all want to form a line if there's other questions as well.
Yeah. Yes, likewise. Please feel free to go ahead and come on down with your questions.
All right, my name is Chris McKinney. I'm a sophomore here at Texas A&M, mechanical engineering major. I'm also a soldier, kind of fresh back from Iraq. My question would be is what makes, sorry about that. Okay. My question would be is what makes you think handguns are particularly volatile? If it's been my experience as a soldier that if properly and safely handled, a handgun will not accidentally discharge.
I think I'll look at this one. I think the key is properly and safely handled. I know I can't cite necessarily incidences and particular statistics, but properly and safely handled is a really important thing. And as a very well trained, and by the way, thank you for your service, especially coming back from Iraq. But I think that you obviously are very well trained in dealing with your handgun and have an appreciation for that weapon. I think that yes, the concealed handle licensing helps you develop that appreciation, but there are always misfirings. There are In places, again, like a great example is residence halls. If you have friends over or something like that, you mess with a gun, and that's not proper handling. Playing with a gun happens, and people want to show their friends their gun, and maybe they forgot to unload it, or maybe like these types of things happen. And that is sort of the volatile nature, I think, of the gun. And simply the fact that it explodes, it means it's inherently volatile. I mean, I think that's a really important part. And really, that's it. I don't think that obviously, the way you handle a gun is definitely not volatile. I'm not saying that in itself is volatile in the same way that having a small explosive is volatile. You're very careful with chemicals in a lab. You have to be very careful, and the moment you're not careful is when Zachary catches on fire, like stuff like that. I think that's really important to understand that those types of things happen because of the inherent volatility of the weapon.
Sir, can I?
That's follow up.
All right. As far as volatility goes, sir, I mean, you can take a handgun, most modern weapons, and throw it out of a moving car, and it will not discharge. CHL holders, like he said, are generally speaking law-abiding citizens. I mean, like, they're less likely to commit crimes than your average police officer or state lawmaker, although I'm not sure they're a good example. Most of these concealed carry holsters often do training beyond actually getting their license, and that actually during the course you are taught to hold or taught to handle a weapon safely. 10 hours, personally, in my opinion, is not enough for that class. But again, most people that get their CHL do additional training on top of that. And I don't think that you're going to see a lot of cases where you have these CHL holders who are 99% of the time very well aware of the consequences of carrying their weapon, running around, showing it to people, playing with it.
Sure. I mean, I think just a very quick response. I don't want to sort of get too much back and forth, but in the same way that we're protecting against, that the argument is to protect against an incident that almost never happens, that it's unbelievably rare how often a shooting there is on campus. If we're protecting ourselves against instances like this on a very safe zone, I think I'm also concerned in the same way that you're willing to try and change the legislation to protect yourself from this. I want to prevent legislation to protect ourselves from that 1%, if that makes sense. And I think that's sort of the similar argument in that sense.
If I can just comment, I think it's important to keep in mind the laws currently in place. A concealed handgun license holder must keep his or her handgun concealed unless he or she encounters an immediate threat of death or serious bodily harm. That means that you can't take it out and show it to somebody in class or anywhere, basically outside of your home. So, the gun is not being handled, the trigger is not exposed, it is very unlikely to discharge. From 1996 to 2007, the state of Texas had 1,754 convictions of discharge of a firearm. 3 of those were of concealed handgun license holders over that 11-year span. Basically, I'm not saying it never happens. It does happen. There was an incident a while back where a senile old man was carrying a replica of a 19th century Derringer, and it fell out of his pocket and discharged. But when it does happen, it seldom results in injury. Those injuries are seldom fatal. It is extremely, extremely rare. And that's all I would add to that.
Okay. Next question, please. Again, name, relation to the university, and your question.
I'm Adam Davies. I'm a sophomore here, and I'm a soldier deploying to Afghanistan next year. Mr. Lewis, I was just going to wonder if you could go over quickly the rate at which CHL holders commit crimes as opposed to average citizens.
Okay. There's different ways of looking at this. Depends on whose statistics you want to go with. We compared conviction rates for negligent homicide and murder over a 6-year span. We found that concealed handgun license holders were 5 times less likely than non-licensed holders to be convicted of negligent homicide or murder over that time period. The concealed handgun license holders are very, very law-abiding. Now, the concealed handgun license is not a magic card. It does not somehow make you a safer or more law-abiding person. What it does is it confirms that you were probably a very safe or law-abiding person all along, or you would not have been issued one. And I'm sure the professor can comment to this, but typically past performance is the most likely indicator of future crime. if you are 21 or above and you've never been convicted of a crime, there's a pretty good chance that you're a relatively law-abiding person, and that's what the concealed handgun license confirms. And so what we've done with the licensing process is you've weeded out those people most likely to commit a violent crime or a crime of any type. And so, yes, our number is, you're 5 times less likely, or concealed handgun license holder is 5 times less likely to commit murder or negligent homicide. The NRA's number, I think, is that a concealed handgun license holder is 7 times less likely to commit a crime of any type. I'm sure our opponents would contest those statistics, but that's what we get from looking at the Texas Department of Public Safety numbers that they put out every year.
Comment?
Do we have a contest?
Of course. There are liars, damn liars, and statisticians. And I'm a statistician. So is George up there. It's irrelevant what the concealed carry rate is. The issue is age 21 to, say, 25. What's the rate? And I suspect that you're more or less right, but I suspect also that it's a lot higher than a 1 to 5 for that subgroup, and that's the only group I frankly care about. The issue is are we more safe or less safe with a mass group of young people carrying them around? I'm not going to be greatly worried about it in either case because I really don't think we're going to see these kinds of issues. But again, just as the soldier noted, I'd rather have him in a room with me than the typical concealed carry guy. All in all, if someone's come down the hall, mainly because we have had some experience and have some possible notions of how to deal with it. That's all.
Sir, my contention was not that I wouldn't want to be with the CHL. I said that I didn't think 10 hours of training was enough.
Right. I don't think it's enough either.
Well, if I could just comment, our numbers did look at the general population, so he's right, as opposed to over 21. The NRA numbers looked only at over 21, so the NRA statistic is that of the Texas population age 21 and above, concealed handgun license holders are 7 times less likely than others in that age group to commit any type of crime, I think was their statistic. And also, I disagree that the question is, does it make us more safe or less safe? I think the question is, does it make us less safe, or will it allow individuals the means to protect themselves? I really don't feel that the burden of proof should be on us to show that it makes society statistically more safe. I think, in a free society, the burden of proof is always placed on those seeking the denial of a right, not those seeking the granting of a right. As long as there's no evidence that it's going to make anyone less safe, I don't see why we should tell individuals they should not be allowed the means to protect themselves.
And any dissent to that? Okay.
Another question.
My name is Chris Barnes. I'm a staff member here at Texas A&M, so I appreciate the earlier sentiment that we were part of the group that's not been asked much. I actually have a couple of different feedback here. I actually have a couple of things I would like to address, if that's okay, and I'd like to do them one at a time and let them address each of them as we go.
Certainly.
The first one, and I believe you were, I'm sorry, I don't remember y'all's names. Robbie. I believe you were the one that brought up the point about protection. CHL is about personal defense. That's the big point here, is that there's a major difference between defense and offensive strategies. I think the common misconception is that CHL holders, when something is happening, they're going to rush into the incident wherever it happens to be. I can't speak to all CHL classes, but the one that I attended and the continuing training that I've had has always been about defending yourself, and in fact, that's the defense. If you go out and do something offensive, you're no longer covered by Texas law. Mm-hmm. You're not out there trying to protect everybody else. You're protecting yourself and only yourself.
I think there was no question, correct? That was just more like a comment and sort of a...
Yeah, I'm
okay,
giving you a
make sure
chance
that was
to
right. I don't want to miss the question.
talk about that.
I think essentially that I always like to hear these statistics about the safety of concealed carry individuals. I'm glad to hear that. I think it's also kind of obvious, I think, if someone pursues a license to carry a weapon, then I think it's sort of inherent that they want to carry the weapon to be safe with it. I wonder what the percentage, I don't know if you have this number, what the percentage of gun owners is compared to the people who carry it safely. And I wonder what the policy is for individuals walking on campus with a weapon, how you if it is noticed, or the ways to sort of address the difference, because you don't have like a cap on that says concealed carry license holder. It's if you have a weapon, you have to address that person and somehow check and see. And I think eliminating those types of things, like and this in the sake of personal defense, if the sort of minimal amount of individuals that have now to say that those people shouldn't be allowed to defend themselves, I think is not what I'm trying to say. What I think I'm trying to say is, and even in what you're saying, there's so limited number of people on campus who will be carrying these weapons, and I think the sort of limited impact that it'll have on the number of weapons on campus, like you said, if it's over 21, there's probably like a guy in here, or 2 or 3 guys in here, and this is a debate, who have concealed weapons, concealed carry licenses. I hesitate to make it a law that allows it, and I also hesitate with the repercussions of allowing people to bring guns on campus.
Okay.
That actually kind of brings up my second point that I wanted to talk about.
Beautifully done.
It seems like the majority of the debate has always been, and I've heard this tonight, has always been about students carrying handguns. There's been several statistics talked about, you have to be 21 to carry, to even apply for a license. And if you look at that, along with the fact that a CHL license costs about $150 to get the license, then you have to buy a gun. We're really not talking about students carrying guns. We're really talking about staff and faculty. Those are the ones that are going to be the preponderance of people who are carrying firearms on campus. I find it somewhat amusing, if it wasn't serious, that everybody's concerned about students carrying when that's actually not the case of what's really going to happen. It's staff like myself, it's professors. Very, very few students would ever carry on campus.
I think I'm mostly concerned with having guns on campus, period, I think is kind of the issue. I think the concealed carry, obviously there are law-abiding citizens. They went through the things like we've said. They have very minimal crime rates. They've been trained, all these things. I think the issue is, again, I think, of course, we talk about students. Again, unfortunately, like we've also mentioned, this is a student referendum. So I think I think the student sort of opinion is very important in terms of the structure of this debate. So I think that's why that's been my focus. But I think my issue is having guns, period. I don't like the idea of having guns inside of a classroom. I think that's wildly inappropriate.
My last question, I'm not sure how you want to phrase this. I spent 3 years on active duty in the Navy and then 6 years in the Reserve. It's kind of a two-part thing. The level of firearms training I got in the military was minuscule compared to what I've received since receiving my CHL. But that's kind of a side point of where I wanted to go. The main point, when I was in the Navy, I was a hospital corpsman. I learned CPR. I was a CPR instructor. That was 30-something years ago. I have maintained my CPR license throughout. In those 30 years, I've had to do CPR on people outside of a medical setting twice. In other words, that's a very low incident rate. The reason I bring that up is because I view carrying my CHL or carrying a firearm in very much the same light. I don't go out looking to perform CPR on somebody. It's not something I want to do. But if I have to do CPR, nothing else will do. When if an incident were to happen and I need my handgun, nothing else will do. I think the saying is if when seconds count, the police are only minutes away.
And do we have comments or response from our
Well,
debaters?
just a quick one. Yes, there are other things that will do, and with a little bit of training, you can find the other things that can do. But the incidence is, as I'm going to predict, is likely to be far lower than the potential for other problems in the population that we're dealing with. That's my primarily concern. As far as the staff are concerned, yeah, I mean, just because you're 25 doesn't mean you have any frontal lobe activity, quite frankly. And So it doesn't guarantee anything. It's just that probabilistically you're more likely to have it.
Okay.
Can I just respond to a couple of those?
Yeah.
First of all, you asked how would you respond? How are police going to know if somebody's a license holder or not? They see a gun. How should people respond to that? Well, as I said before, you have to have the gun concealed. If somebody notices the gun, it then becomes a police matter. I said earlier, one person out of 55 in the state of Texas is licensed to carry a concealed handgun. How many handguns did you see being carried around College Station today? Not a lot. These guns are usually kept very well concealed. If you so much as tell someone that you're carrying a concealed handgun, that's considered failure to conceal. That's a Class A misdemeanor, can result in 10 years in jail. So it is a very serious issue. Police can run somebody's driver's license and find out real quick if they have a concealed handgun license. So it's something that if somebody says, hey, that guy looked like maybe he had a gun under his shirt, cops can go over there, check for ID, find out real quick what's going on. We're talking about the difference between offensive and defensive. I think there is this idea that what we're proposing is arming a bunch of vigilantes that, if we're all sitting in here and then suddenly we hear gunshots coming from down the hall, that 5 or 6 of us are going to draw our guns and form a little posse and go look for the guy. That's not how it works. Concealed carry is about personal protection. It's about self-defense. You are taught in the CHL course, do not intervene in a situation that does not involve you. Do not seek out an active shooter. If you go to my website, which is campuscarry.com, and look at the facts and arguments page, you will see clips from a concealed handgun licensing class where the instructor is giving the scenario. He says, let's say you're in a mall. You're in a mall and you hear gunshots and you're misguided, so you're going to draw your weapon and run to solve the problem. Well, hell, a shopkeeper may see you with the gun, he hears gunshots, thinks you're the problem, and takes you out. Or an off-duty police officer shopping with his wife, or a mall security guard, or someone like that may take you out. What kind of problems have you just brought down on your head by trying to play police officer? I mean, that's something they drive home. They drive home the ramifications of using your weapon legally, using it illegally, using it ill-advisedly. And if you are not facing an immediate threat of death or serious bodily harm, like I just said, it's a Class A misdemeanor. If I hear gunshots or I get a text message from Code Maroon saying gunman on campus and I decide I'm going to draw my gun and go look for that guy, I just created a Class A misdemeanor. I'm going to be spending some time in jail. So I think that's important to keep in mind what is and isn't allowed of concealed handgun license holders.
Okay, thank you.
Move on to the next question.
Okay, for just a moment, my colleague has to swap out his videotape. But please, at this time, we are actually running at just about an hour, just under an hour. So I will offer, does anybody need a break? Conveniently while the tape is being swapped out. No? Okay. Sounds good. In just a few seconds then, we'll be able to allow your question and continue with our discussion here.
How many have past military experience in this room, out of curiosity?
Wow.
Awesome. Awesome. Or current.
I feel safer.
Yeah.
For that matter, actually, how many people in this room are concealed handgun license holders? Not necessarily carrying, but...
If you'll admit to it.
Yeah, if you'll admit to it. Okay. Alrighty, and at this point, go ahead and hit record. Okay. At this point, we're ready to take your question.
Okay. My name is Darcy Jones, and I'm a junior here at A&M, and my question doesn't really have anything to do with the volatility or necessarily the overall dangerousness of this debate. I'm more concerned about, as a student paying to be at this university, I know both sides mentioned the funding for this from the university, and I was just wondering if you guys could clarify that or explain a little bit more, because I know the opposing side mentioned that it theoretically would be cheaper to possibly put a police officer or a SWAT member in every classroom as opposed to allowing this. To my knowledge, every cent that went towards this came out of the license holder's pocket. And so I was wondering if you guys could clarify what university funding there would be if it was allowed here.
I think this kind of puts on to another issue, I think, and for personally me, another issue. I think that in the sort of air of huge budget cuts and firing of faculty and tuition rate hikes. I think that this issue is in a weird way sort of comical and irrelevant to the current state of Texas A&M, and that we already are a very safe place. We have had very few incidents and lots of violent crime. I looked over the crime today. It's actually lower than I had expected, and I think that if we are firing our teachers, we should be up in arms and we should be talking about this type of issue in the same sort of format in terms of budget cuts. And I think that's also really important. In terms of what will happen if now we allow for like students, faculty, and staff who are concealed carry licensed to carry weapons, I have a sneaking suspicion there will be no funding sent to it, and I think that's a bad thing. I think if we have to fire our teachers, I don't think that we're going to be able to fund sort of extra training for these people to deal with what it means to be the only person in a room with a gun, or what does it mean that you may be dealing with a student that has a concealed handgun and you have a handgun and you're in a confrontation. Like these types of things, maybe additional training that may be involved in a concealed carry license, but I think additional training is required, and I think also additional types of locks and these types of things are going to be required to sort of change the campus to be concealed carry friendly when we haven't had to address that at all before. So new programs are going to be, and I don't think we'll pay for it, perfectly.
Yeah, I guess as a clarification, my question would be, how would this affect every student? Would we have to pay more, like tuition or things like that, if something like this were to be allowed?
Well, as I said before, I'm not aware of any significant or even discernible costs that this has caused for the 71 college campuses that currently allow it. I don't see there being any additional training required. I mean, basically, if you're a concealed handgun license holder, you would be required to act as you were trained to act in the concealed handgun licensing course. As for campus law enforcement, they're trained police officers. They've already been trained how to act as police officers. They can handle this just as well as the police. I'm assuming that the police at Texas A&M are every bit as competent as the police in College Station. I would like to think they are, and they can handle this just as well as the police outside of campus handle it when they encounter concealed handgun license holders. There's this notion a lot of people have that right now the cops, their policy is shoot anyone with a gun on campus, because if the guy's got a gun on campus, he must be a bad guy, so we can just shoot him. And so obviously we're going to have to retrain them all now, because they're going to have to, they're going to encounter these people with guns, and they're going to have to stop them and figure out what's going on. Well, the reality is cops already have to make a judgment call every time they encounter someone with a gun, because it could be an off-duty police officer who's taking classes here on campus. It could be an undercover police officer who's conducting an investigation here on campus. It could be one of you who just wrestled the gun away from an assailant, and now you're standing over him holding the gun, and they run into the room. They don't get to shoot first and ask questions later. They already have to make a judgment call. And so the idea, I think, that additional training is going to be required. As long as they're commissioned police officers in the state of Texas, they should know how to handle the situation. As far as additional locks and things like that, I don't see any of that being necessary. The only thing that might be necessary would be if the school decided it wanted to require gun safes in residence halls or something like that. And like I said, the way that the bills are currently written, they offer a lot of leeway. The schools could actually require the students to pay for those themselves. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And no further comments. All right. Again, your name, your relation to the university, and your question.
Howdy, my name is Paul Jaska. I'm a senior in the Corps of Cadets. I'm also in the Aggie Band. I'm here because I was here to listen to the debate about concealed carry on campus. I am a CHL holder, and I wanted to respond to a point made about possibly allowing seniors in the Corps to be able to carry on campus as one of this exempt statuses. When I graduate, I'm not joining the military. I have almost zero special military training over and above any other student here on campus. I do shoot regularly. I do train regularly, but not with the Corps or anything like that. So I just wanted to respond to that point. The other question I had has to do with this 25-year-old possible restriction on concealed carry on campus. The thing is, cars are a lot more dangerous than guns. More people are killed by cars every day, and if